Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be discussing some common mistakes beginners make when drawing hair with colored pencils, and also discuss ways to avoid them in order to make your hair drawings more realistic. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce you to my absolutely free ebook, The Basics of Realistic Colored Pencil Art. The link will be in the description. It's a quick guide for beginners especially on the tools and techniques that are necessary for realistic drawing with colored pencils. These are the basics and therefore they are essential. I'll urge you to check it out. So let's start with the don'ts. The first mistake beginners usually make is to draw an inaccurate sketch or outline. The sketch is quite literally the backbone of the drawing, and if you get it wrong, the possibility of all other things going wrong is very high. I've got an entire video on how to draw outlines or sketches, so you can check that out. You can tell that I'm doing a freehand sketch here, so there is no real system being used to achieve an accurate outline. Now, this is fine, but not for a beginner in my opinion. Freehand sketches can be tricky, especially if you're a beginner, and the possibility of getting your proportions wrong is quite high. The second mistake is when you do very dark or harsh outlines while coloring, like you see me do here. Now, if you are going for a more cartoonish look, then this is fine, but in the context of realistic drawing, you don't want to have a very harsh or sort of well-defined outline when coloring. In real life, hair does not have a dark outline along the edges. Even for very dark hair, there's some level of softness along the edges. Now, the third mistake is trying to draw individual strands of hair. This is probably the biggest error beginners make. Now, when you look at hair, you don't really see the strands individually. I mean, you know when you are aware that hair is made up of individual strands, but in reality, you see them as a group except for a few flyaway hairs that you may see along the edges. To create a more realistic look, it's important to draw hair as a group rather than drawing individual strands. Another mistake is not layering enough, especially when drawing very dense hair. You need to cover the white of the paper as much as possible in order to have a more natural or realistic look. And the only way to do that is to have enough layers and also to blend, which leads me to my next point in the don't section, which is not blending. If you have no system of blending for your hair, you will have a lot of the grain of the paper showing through your drawing, and it will become very obvious that not much effort was put into making the drawing look realistic. Using a blunt pencil is another mistake I see a lot of beginners make. Your pencil needs to be sharp at all times in order to get into the tooth of the paper. This will also help to hide the tooth of the paper and prevent the grain of the paper from showing through your drawing. Lastly, most beginners rush through the drawing. Realistic drawings require some level of commitment and patience. So this is the final look. Now let's move on to the do's. But before we do that, don't forget to subscribe if you're finding this video helpful. The first thing I do after drawing the outline is to map out the shadows or the darkest sections of the hair using a dark color. This helps to give a general monochromatic view of the drawing even before it's finished. It also helps to guide the shading process. Generally, you don't want to go in with black even if the shadows are black, because then it will start looking a bit flat. It's more ideal to start with a dark brown or a dark gray and then layer black on top. The next step is to shade in the base layer. This is the lightest color that you can see across the entire region of hair being shaded. The purpose of the base layer is to create depth by helping cover or conceal some of the white grain of the paper. Now, of course, this will depend on the color of hair you are drawing, but in this example, the base layer was light amber. The next thing is to build up the layers by layering the darker colors on top of the base layer, shading progressively until you get to the darkest layer, like you see me do here. Notice I'm not drawing individual strands of hair. The approach is more of shading rather than drawing single strands of hair. Now, after layering comes blending, so the next step is to blend. I blend using a solvent, and this works best on textured paper. So one thing to take note of is to use a moderately textured paper which can accept enough layers for blending. After the first round of blending, I wait for the solvent to dry out for about 5 to 10 minutes. I then go in again and layer from light to dark in the same manner as I did before blending. After, I wait again for another 5 to 10 minutes before blending for the second time. So here you can see me do the second round of blending. Typically, I do 2 rounds of blending before going in for the last time with the colored pencils. The last layer of colored pencils typically deals with the details. So this is why I shade in the highlight where I need to, and also ensure that my shadows are as dark as they should be. I also draw a few flyaway hairs at this stage. So I'm quite sure you've noticed by now that the entire process is not rushed. It takes quite some time and effort. Colored pencil is generally a slow medium, but if done right, the end result can be rewarding. You can also tell there are no harsh or definite outlines along the edges of the drawing. All of these are subtle but tiny details that really transform your drawing. Also, I ensured that the pencil was sharp at all times. I used the Prismacolor Premier pencils for this one. So at this stage, you just have to keep going back and forth, correcting any errors you might see and also making all the necessary adjustments. The last step is when I use the crafting knife to draw in flyaway hairs that tend to move across the main clumps of hair. I gently incline the knife to an angle and then move in the direction of the hair. This reveals the lighter layers beneath the hair and then creates the illusion of a flyaway hair. This is a very useful tool which can make a big difference with regards to realism. Another thing to take note of is to pay attention to the direction of the hair. Generally, you want to move according to the contours of the hair. Also, when drawing flyaway hairs that tend to stick out of the main clumps of hair, be sure to use or apply very little pressure to create the illusion of thin hair. Again, don't forget to check out the free ebook, link is in the description. If you enjoyed watching this, I'm sure you'll enjoy watching this particular video too. Have a great day and I'll see you in the next one.